Welcome back to a slice of news, where I cut you off a slice of news. I've often said Republicans can't win an election unless they cheat. And it seems like they have been trying very hard to prove me right, because lately they've been leaning hard on gerrymandering as many states as they can to cling to their Republican majority by any means necessary. The political winds seem to be changing, and the Republicans do not like the direction it is going. So instead of running candidates with policies that are actually good for people and make people's lives better, they'd much rather depend on voter disenfranchisement and drawing election maps that are comically unfair to Democrat voters. Negating the voices of voters who don't vote Republican is something that they have often depended on to win elections. But going into the midterm elections next year, it looks like their gerrymander plans may be backfiring on them. For seeing big losses in those elections, Republicans went all out trying to redraw their election maps to take seats away from Democrats in states like Indiana and Kansas. But when Texas announced that they were going to try redrawing their election maps to favor Republicans, Democrats started saying, well, if you can do it, we can do it too. California voters approved a ballot initiative that countered that Texas gerrymandering to add 5 Democratic-leaning seats. Virginia said, hey, we're going to redraw our maps too to favor Democrats, which could potentially cost Republicans 4 more seats. In Indiana, they voted not to convene for a special session next month and are adjourned until the beginning of next year. So any plans to gerrymander over there are at least paused. And in Kansas, it turned out Republicans didn't even have the votes to redraw their election maps. So the cracks in the Republicans' great gerrymander plan is already starting to show. But in probably the biggest blow to Republicans, a federal district court ruled that Texas's gerrymandering was an illegal racial gerrymander, and they have to go back to use their 2021 maps for this midterm election. Texas tried to take 5 seats away from Democrats, and all they seem to have gotten for their trouble is California getting 5 more and them not winning anything at all. And of course, in typical Republican fashion, when they don't get their way in the courts, they go straight to appeal. But the filing deadline for that appeal is in just a couple of weeks, and they just might not make it. Republicans were super depending on that Texas gerrymander to really help them, and they are possibly not even going to get it. Even Utah was ordered by courts in the state to add a safe Democrat seat to their state. And Democrats in Missouri look like they have enough votes to put an initiative before the voters in their state to repeal a recently approved voting map in their state that took away one of the Democrat seats. It's really looking like in the gerrymander game, Republicans are actually losing. But regardless of who is winning or losing the gerrymander game, the real question is, should we really be depending on comically drawn and often intentionally unfairly drawn electoral maps to win elections? To me, gerrymandering has seemed like the height of unfairness, an obvious way of subverting the voice and intention of the voters of that state when they don't go the way that the political party in power wants them to. And I say the political party, but really it's Republicans. Democrats rarely are the ones who are redrawing their own electoral maps to eliminate Republican votes, but Republicans are often caught doing exactly that, because as non-white voters have become a larger and larger voice within the electoral process, they have lost a lot of their control, because oftentimes minorities realize accurately that Republicans and Republican policies often do not favor them and in fact disenfranchise them, so they are more likely to vote Democrat. So Republicans figure if they can't get non-whites to vote for them, they can at least make sure that when they do vote, their votes count less when they redraw the electoral maps to favor Republicans, even though the voters in those districts, if they were drawn actually fairly, would not favor them. While it might not be entirely accurate to call gerrymandering cheating, it certainly is unfair, and Republicans live by the mantra of winning by any means necessary, and fairness isn't something that even enters into the equation in their mind. When you really come down to it, the big problem Republicans have is that conservatism as an ideology is losing out in this country. The times are changing, and as their name implies, conservatives are not about change. They're all about staying the way they were, or opining for the great things that were back in the day, when it's clear what they really miss is being able to tell black people they couldn't live certain places, and women were back at home in the kitchen instead of in the workforce. Republicans love to paint themselves as folksy and old-timey when really all they are is sexist and racist, which I guess if you think about it, is kind of folksy and old-timey. And I think a lot of Americans are waking up to the fact that that conservative mindset, that idea where everything has to be looking backwards instead of forwards, all it's done is held us back, and they're just understandably tired of it. And when they get their chance in the voting booth, they're voting like they are. Conservatism is losing the American culture war, so they're only recourse is to try to retain their grip on power by making sure elections are as unfair as possible in their favor. I think it's almost comical that Republicans love to cry about free and fair elections and how the voice of the people must be heard. They do everything they can to make sure elections are as unfair as possible and that the only voice being heard is their own. And they know that. They're doing this on purpose. They know the ultimate goal is supremacy and to suppress non-conservative, non-Republican voices, but they figure as long as they wrap themselves in the flag and try to make it all about election integrity, they can get away with it, and it seems that largely they've been proven correct. Republicans want to play the good guy while not acting it. I mean, do you know how bad you have to be to make Gavin Newsom look like the good guy? Admittedly, that's sort of a rhetorical question, but the answer is very. Honestly, I'm all here for the death of conservatism in America. For way too long, we've been bowing at the altar of capitalism, and conservatives have turned capitalism into practically the new religion, while demonizing anyone and anything that breaks with it. It's one of the reasons there was so much pushback against now Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani in New York City. But even with all their attempted pushback, he won anyway, which many, myself included, saw as a sign that the times are changing, despite what the conservatives would like, and Americans are slowly turning away from them, and that capitalism overall mentality. American conservatives love corporate profits and the acquisition of wealth so much you would think they were the Ferengi from Star Trek, and its wealth inequality just seems to get worse and worse over time, and trickle-down economics more and more proves itself to not be a thing. There seems less and less of an incentive to want to cling to that way of running the country, really of being that way in general. More than anything, we as a nation need progress and vision, a desire to move forward and not be stuck in the past, and not be shackled by a cycle of poverty and debt that lasts generations, that only leads to more exploitation by the ultra-wealthy. If Republicans had their way, we would all be run by corporate control. Instead of for the people, by the people, it would be for the corporations, by the corporations. And some would argue we already are that way. We really just need a sense of hope and fresh ideas, which are two things that Republicans never offer and can never offer. Republicans run in elections on platforms of making things better, but all they seem to ever do is make things worse. Whenever a Democratic president leaves the nation with a surplus before leaving office, the Republicans always seem to find a way to run us into a deficit. On top of everything, the party of fiscal responsibility, conservatism, seem to show themselves as being really bad with money. Unemployment seems to be at its highest when states and the nation are run by conservative rule. Republicans like to say they're going to make things better, but conspicuously they never do. I wonder why. Conservatives rule by oppression and suppression. They love to take rights away and decide certain people aren't worthy of them. They have a baked-in hatred of the unlike. So understandably, their greatest fear is those who are not like them to gain power and maybe start getting treated the way they've been treating others. They're all about playing by the rules, unless the rules don't favor them, in which case they don't want the rules to apply to them at all. When it comes to this whole gerrymandering thing, it's like they took a hand of cards and added a couple of extra cards, but then when the Democrats added their own extra cards, they're like, hey, that's cheating. You're not allowed to have extra cards. And then the courts took away some of Republicans' extra cards. Yeah, I don't know. That metaphor may be getting away from me. But the point is, Republicans saw the outcomes of the 2026 midterm elections coming, and they did not see themselves coming out on top. So they said, hey, we got to cheat because we got to win. But it's really looking like the only ones who are winning are Democrats. In 2026, it's just going to see them win even more. And as former Trump advisor Steve Bannon was recently quoted as saying at a conservative event, I will tell you right now, as God is my witness, if we lose the midterm and we lose 2028, some in this room are going to prison, myself included. And yes, Steve, that's the plan. and I will love to see it happen. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news.